The wind rolled across the Nevada desert like a living thing, hot, gritty, and full of secrets. The kind of wind that scraped against the skin and whispered through the dunes like distant ghosts. It was the sound of isolation, of a place that belonged to no one. Erin Blake leaned against the side of a military Humvee, her camera strapped to her chest and a notepad tucked into the cargo pocket of her jeans. Sweat darkened her shirt beneath her tactical vest. She'd been on countless assignments before, Afghanistan, Iraq, the Philippines, but this one felt different. This wasn't a war zone. This was supposed to be safe. The Joint Task Force had invited her to document a week-long survival, training exercise, a cooperative between U.S. Army Rangers, Air Force parascumen, and a few shadowy operators from a unit no one officially named, but everyone recognized. Delta Force. The military wanted a human interest piece about teamwork and endurance. Erin wanted something raw, real, not a sanitized recruitment ad. She remembered the colonel's warning before they deployed. Stay close to the convoy. Blake, this isn't a photo shoot. It's the Mojave. It kills unprepared people in hours. She had smiled, snapping a photo of his stern face. Don't worry, Colonel. I've been in worse places. By noon, the heat shimmered like liquid glass. Soldiers trudged through dunes in full gear, their faces hidden behind goggles and sand-colored scarves. Erin followed on foot, camera clicking in bursts, capturing every struggle, every expression, every drop of sweat. She loved documenting resilience. It reminded her that even in hell, humanity had rhythm. Captain Reese Holloway, the Delta operator leading the training, had been the first to notice her determination. You're not like most reporters, he said during a brief water break. I take that as a compliment, she replied, lowering her camera. You've got the eyes of someone who's seen too much. People should see what that costs. He smirked faintly, his voice quiet beneath the whirring wind. People don't want the truth. They want stories that make them feel brave. She studied him, his calm, unreadable face. She knew he'd served in real war zones. She also knew men like him didn't talk unless it mattered. That afternoon, a sudden radio crackle shattered the dry air. Base to convoy. We have an unscheduled detonation test 3 miles east. All units, pull back to safe zone immediately. The tone wasn't calm. It was urgent. The convoy erupted into motion. Engines roared. Dust swallowed the horizon. Erin grabbed her bag, but before she could climb aboard the nearest vehicle, a second transmission came through, garbled, broken by static. Soldiers shouted over each other. One truck spun in the sand. Then a sudden, thunderous blast shook the ground, not near enough to kill, but close enough to rattle the bones. The world became chaos. Sand whipped into Erin's face as she stumbled behind the moving convoy. She waved her arms, coughing, shouting for someone to stop. But her voice was drowned by the rumble of engines and the roar of wind. Through her camera lens, she could see silhouettes, trucks speeding away, men yelling into radios. She ran, her boots sinking in the sand, lungs burning. Then silence. The sound of engines faded into the distance, leaving only the endless hiss of desert wind. Erin froze, panting, blinking through the haze. The convoy was gone. She turned in every direction. No tire tracks, no radio chatter, no sign of movement. Just empty desert stretching to infinity. Her first thought was disbelief. They'd notice. They'd turn back. Someone would realize she was missing. But as minutes bled into an hour, the sun climbed higher, burning her skin through her shirt. She checked her canteen, half full. Checked her sat phone, dead. The sandstorm's interference had drained it earlier in the day. Okay, Erin, she muttered aloud, forcing a shaky breath. You've been through worse. You've got training, think. She shaded her eyes and scanned the horizon. There, distant ridgelines, maybe a mile north. Shade. She slung her camera bag across her shoulder and started walking. The desert floor shimmered like a mirage. Each step kicked up a puff of hot dust that clung to her legs. Time slowed. Her throat dried. After 20 minutes, her heartbeat thudded in her ears, louder than her footsteps. She took small sips from the canteen, careful not to waste a drop. By the time she reached the ridge, her body ached from the heat. She crouched under a sliver of rock shadow, unrolled a map, and tried to pinpoint her position. Somewhere near Sector 9, maybe, but the terrain all looked the same. She cursed under her breath, folding the map again. The first wave of panic came quietly, the realization that she had no radio, no signal, and no idea how far she'd wandered from the convoy route. The silence pressed down like a weight. "Someone will come," she whispered, writing the words in her notebook just to hear her pen scratch against the paper. "They'll come." By sunset, the desert turned cold. The heat bled away fast, replaced by a biting wind. Erin wrapped herself in her vest and lay beneath the ridge, watching stars prick the sky. The air was so still she could hear her own heartbeat. In the distance, she imagined the sound of engines. She even stood, calling out, waving her flashlight, but it was nothing. Just wind and imagination. Back at the base, soldiers unpacked gear, exhausted. A head count was taken twice. Everyone was accounted for. Or so they thought. Erin's name was on the manifest, checked off by mistake. Only one man noticed. Captain Reese Holloway was cleaning his rifle when he spotted her small black camera bag sitting beside the refueling station. He frowned. She never went anywhere without it. He called the comms tent. "Did Blake check in?" The response came lazy, tired. "Yeah, she's with Alpha Convoy, sir." Reese's jaw tightened. He didn't believe it. He picked up the bag, opened it. Inside was her press ID, a small notepad, and a cracked lens. Something was wrong. He stepped outside, staring toward the dark horizon. The desert stretched endlessly, silent, dangerous, indifferent. Somewhere out there, Erin Blake was alone. And while others went to bed, Reese Holloway made a silent decision. He wasn't going to wait for permission. Because men like him had seen this before. Bureaucracy delaying rescue, hours turning to days. And in the desert, a single day could mean death. He walked toward the hangar, eyes cold, voice steady. "Wake up my team," he told the sergeant on duty. "We've got someone to find." Out in the dunes, Erin looked up at the same stars. Her lips were cracked, her body trembling from exhaustion, but her spirit held steady. She whispered to herself, to the night, to the desert, to whoever might be listening, "You're not done yet. Erin, they're coming for you." And miles away, under the cloak of darkness, Delta Force was already rolling out. The morning sun rose like a white-hot blade, slicing across the desert horizon. Erin Blake's body protested with every movement, legs stiff, shoulders aching, throat parched. The temperature had already begun its relentless climb, promising a day of scorching heat and endless sand. She stood under the scant shadow of a jagged ridge, scanning the dunes for any sign of life, any trace of the convoy that had abandoned her. Her water supply was almost gone, less than a quarter of a canteen, and her energy reserves were dwindling. The desert was an unforgiving teacher, stripping her of comfort, her confidence, and slowly testing the limits of human endurance. Every step she took sank deep into the hot sand, pulling at her boots as if the ground itself wanted to claim her. Erin's mind raced. She replayed the evacuation over and over, the chaos, the shouting, the roar of engines fading into the distance. How could she have been left behind? Her thoughts drifted to fear and frustration, but she pushed them aside. Panic would waste oxygen she didn't have. Survival demanded focus. She opened her camera bag, searching for anything that could help. Her notebook, pens, and camera were intact, but she had no compass, no GPS signal, and no radio. Her phone had died the moment the dust storm hit. Alone, she relied only on memory, instinct, and the faint hope someone would notice her absence. Erin took out her notebook and began jotting down observations, a habit ingrained from her war zone reporting. The desert's terrain wasn't uniform. Sand dunes rose and fell like frozen waves, punctuated by patches of jagged rock and scrubby desert brush. She noted small tracks in the sand, maybe rodents, maybe nothing. She wrote about the wind direction, the sun's position, anything that might help a rescuer triangulate her location. Hours passed. Her water supply dwindled faster than expected under the desert sun. Each sip was measured carefully. Her mouth felt like sandpaper, her tongue swollen, and her lips cracked. She dug into the soil, hoping for moisture, but the sand was dry, sterile. Not even the smallest sign of life. Meanwhile, back at the base, Captain Reese Holloway refused to ignore the nagging feeling that Erin Blake had not returned with the convoy. He had checked the ID, examined her camera bag, and confirmed the absence of her personal effects in the vehicles that made it back. His instincts screamed that something was wrong. "Sergeant, call the other Delta units. I need a team ready for immediate deployment," he ordered. His tone was sharp but quiet, the kind that demanded instant compliance. "No one goes out until I say, but prep the gear. She's out there, and we're not waiting for permission." The sergeant hesitated, caught between regulations and Reese's authority. But years of knowing his instincts told him there was no question. Hours mattered here. In the desert, a missing person could become a casualty in less than a day. Back with Erin, the sun climbed to its zenith, relentless. She stumbled forward, forcing her legs to move despite the burning cramps. Every step felt like dragging concrete. Sweat soaked her hair, running down her face and stinging her eyes. Her vision blurred. She stopped to rest under the only shade she could find, a small crevice in a jagged rock formation. Her thoughts were heavy with fear. She imagined the convoy realizing their mistake, the command center discovering her absence. Would anyone come for her? Or was she already considered lost, another statistic in the unforgiving desert? She scrawled in her notebook again. "If someone finds this, know that I didn't give up." "I won't, not yet." Her body ached. Her energy was fading. Her breathing was shallow, but she forced herself to keep moving. She followed the ridge lines northward, believing that higher ground might give her a better vantage point to see the convoy route or any approaching vehicles. Hours later, she spotted movement, or at least what she thought was movement. Dust rising in the distance. A vehicle? A mirage? Her heart leapt, then sank as she realized it was a tumbleweed carried by the wind. The desert mocked her hopes. By late afternoon, her water was gone. Every step became agony. She sank to the sand, head bowed, hands pressing against her thighs as if to push life back into her weary body. The sun's intensity was unbearable, the wind now sharp, burning her exposed skin. Erin realized that staying in one place was as dangerous as moving. She needed shade, shelter, anything to conserve energy until the temperature dropped. Desperation forced her to improvise. She tore a strip from her sleeve, wrapping it around her mouth and nose to reduce inhaling sand. She dug a shallow depression beneath the rock overhang and huddled there, conserving every ounce of strength. Her mind wandered, but she clung to the memories of her father, a Vietnam veteran who had taught her survival skills in backyards and forests. Rudimentary, yes, but better than nothing. As night fell, the desert transformed. The temperature plummeted, leaving Erin shivering beneath her makeshift covering. She could see the stars overhead, brilliant and indifferent. She thought about the men she had met that day. Soldiers, Delta operators, those who survived worse than she could imagine. Somewhere out there, she hoped they were searching. Meanwhile, Reese Holloway and his team had mobilized. Using Erin's last known GPS coordinates, the direction of the convoy, and the knowledge that she had probably followed the ridgelines for safety, they began planning a tactical search. Delta Force didn't rely on luck. They relied on tracking, instincts honed in combat zones, and an unwavering commitment to never leave anyone behind. Reese studied maps, night vision scopes, and satellite imagery. His mind ran through possibilities: dehydration, heat exhaustion, hallucination. He knew Erin was alive. He had to. She had survived war zones, survived danger, and survived chaos before. If anyone could hold on in the desert, it was her. Back in her rock crevice, Erin's mind drifted between hope and fear. She whispered to herself, repeating mantras of survival. Keep moving. Keep breathing. Keep thinking. Someone will find you. Her voice was barely audible over the whistling wind, but it gave her strength. She forced her body upright, scanning the horizon with tired eyes. Hours passed in tense silence. Erin marked her trail with small piles of rocks, breadcrumbs for any potential rescuer. She moved slowly, deliberately, aware that one misstep could spell collapse or worse. As midnight approached, exhaustion overtook her. She collapsed beneath a ridge, notebook clutched to her chest. Sleep was fleeting, broken by the cold, by nightmares of being left behind, by the sound of distant sand shifts that could have been a predator or nothing. Somewhere beyond the dunes, Captain Reese's team was moving. They were silent, methodical, a force trained to survive any environment. They wouldn't rest until Erin Blake was found. And Erin, though exhausted and dehydrated, held on to that knowledge in her heart. She was not forgotten. The desert was merciless. But so was she. The desert night stretched endlessly, a canvas of darkness pierced only by cold starlight. Erin Blake huddled beneath the jagged rocks, shivering as exhaustion gnawed at her body. Every muscle ached, every breath burned, and yet she refused to give in. She knew the desert could kill anyone foolish enough to surrender. She had survived worse. Her mind replayed the day, the explosion, the chaos, the convoy leaving without her. She forced herself to remember her training, her father's lessons, and the instincts that had kept her alive in dangerous zones before. Find water. Conserve energy. Leave clues. She dug shallow depressions in the sand to catch whatever moisture might seep overnight, rationed the last drops of water from her canteen, and wrapped herself in fabric scraps to retain warmth. The desert wind whistled around her like mocking laughter, whispering secrets only the dunes knew. But Erin didn't flinch. Miles away, at the base camp, Captain Reese Holloway paced in front of a large digital map. The ID check, the camera bag, the empty spots on the manifest, all signs pointed to one horrifying conclusion. Erin Blake was not with the convoy. Reese knew the bureaucracy would slow any official search. Every minute mattered. She's out there, he muttered to himself, his jaw tight. And we're going to find her. He activated a satellite-linked tracker on Erin's camera and laptop equipment. The signals were weak, intermittent, a flickering heartbeat across the desert's expanse. Using the last GPS coordinates and a series of topographic overlays, Reese triangulated her probable location. Delta Force didn't rely on luck. They relied on analysis, instinct, and precision, honed through countless operations in hostile terrain. Reese called in a small, elite team, men he had trained with for years. Each was armed, experienced, and ready to move under the cloak of darkness. There would be no hesitation, no delay, no excuses. By the time the team was ready, Erin was already moving again, guided only by the faint outline of distant ridgelines. Her steps were slow, deliberate, exhaustion turning her movements into a dangerous rhythm. She scrawled notes into her notebook whenever she could, leaving pieces of evidence for anyone searching. A pile of stones here, a torn piece of cloth there. Each mark was a plea. Follow me. Don't leave me behind. Reese's team entered the desert quietly. Night vision goggles illuminated the sand with an eerie green glow. They moved like shadows, scanning the dunes for signs of life, footprints, discarded belongings, small disturbances in the sand. Every clue mattered. The desert didn't hide much. It revealed survival in subtle ways. Within the first hour, they discovered a bootprint partially buried by shifting sand. Reese knelt to examine it, his gloved fingers tracing the shape. She's moving north, he said. Light on supplies, but still alive. Keep moving. The team pressed forward, carefully avoiding the jagged rocks that could ruin their approach. Every member knew the stakes. Erin's life was on the line, and the desert gave no mercy. Reese's heart pounded, but his face remained calm. The calm of a man trained to act under pressure, to think while chaos raged around him. Back with Erin, hallucinations began to creep in. The stars above seemed to twist into shapes. Shadows in the rocks whispered threats, and the wind carried imagined voices. She shook her head, forcing her focus on survival. She reminded herself, stay awake. Keep moving. Follow the ridge. Hours passed. The desert became colder, more unforgiving. Erin stumbled over uneven sand, almost falling into a small ravine. She cried out in frustration and pain, her voice swallowed by the wind. But she pressed on. Every breath was an act of defiance. Every step was a victory over the desert's silent cruelty. Reese's team had found more evidence. A torn notebook page partially buried in sand. The handwriting was unmistakable. Erin Blake had been here. She's close, Reese said, his voice low but firm. Split teams. Watch for signs of dehydration. Heat exhaustion is fast here. If she's still moving, she's alive. Keep her alive. The Delta operators spread out, scanning for footprints and subtle disturbances. They noted patterns in the sand, dragging marks, crushed vegetation, small stone piles. Each clue told a story, a person moving, surviving, refusing to surrender. Erin's resilience impressed them even without seeing her yet. As dawn approached, Erin's strength waned. Her steps became uneven, her vision blurred, and her throat screamed with thirst. She collapsed beside a small boulder, leaning against it for support. Her notebook rested beside her, open to pages filled with desperate sketches and observations. She whispered to herself, someone will find me. They must. And someone was. Reese, scanning from a dune's ridge, spotted movement, subtle, fleeting, but unmistakable. A shadow shifted among the rocks. His heart tightened. There, he whispered. Move in quietly. Thermal scopes up. Eyes on target. The Delta team advanced cautiously. Every step was measured. The desert wind carried dust, obscuring vision and confusing thermal imaging, but they pressed forward. They weren't just searching for a lost journalist. They were following signs of life, of determination, of human will. Erin struggled to stand, leaning heavily on her camera bag. Every muscle screamed, every thought screamed surrender, but she remembered the Delta motto, no one left behind. She held on to that, even without knowing they were near. Reese's voice crackled through combs, low but firm. Team, eyes sharp. She's alive. We bring her home. Move carefully. As the first rays of sunlight crested the horizon, the desert revealed more clues: scattered footprints, dragged sand, a torn piece of clothing caught on a rock. The Delta team closed in. Reese felt the familiar tension in his chest. Adrenaline and focus intermingled. They were about to make contact, and every second counted. Erin, hearing distant voices she couldn't yet discern, felt hope stir. Her strength was almost gone, but survival instincts surged. She marked another stone pile, a sign, praying someone would notice. Somewhere beyond the dunes, men trained for this exact scenario were closing in. Men who didn't wait for permission. Men who refused to let the desert claim her. The sun rose higher, baking the sand into glowing waves. Erin paused, head drooping. She could feel the exhaustion in her bones, could taste the sand in her mouth. But she didn't fall. Not yet. Reese adjusted his scope and whispered, "There, movement. That's her." Eyes on her? The team held position, assessing, planning. Every step forward could trigger her panic or worsen her condition. But the Delta Force operators had seen worse, and they moved with precision and care. Erin's eyes fluttered open. She saw shapes moving in the distance, figures moving deliberately, shadows among the rocks. She thought they were mirages, illusions of hope. She shouted, hoarse, barely audible, "Help!" Reese's heart tightened. "That's her," he confirmed, and the team moved in swiftly, silently, like ghosts of the desert. Somewhere in the vast, empty expanse, hope and expertise were converging. Survival was no longer a gamble. Erin Blake was not alone. The sun had risen to its zenith, and the Nevada desert transformed into an oven. Erin Blake's body was a battleground. Her lips cracked, tongue swollen, and every step felt like dragging weights through sand. The heat pressed down on her relentlessly, making each breath shallow and painful. Sweat burned her eyes, stung her skin, and soaked her clothing. Her strength was fading, but surrender was not an option. She leaned against a jagged rock, attempting to find some shade. Even that meager shelter offered little relief. Her water supply was gone. Every thought revolved around survival: how far she could walk, how long she could endure, and how she might signal someone if she collapsed. The desert's oppressive heat was not her only enemy. Exhaustion gnawed at her bones, and delirium whispered lies that tested her resolve. Her notebook lay beside her, pages filled with desperate sketches, survival notes, and scattered reflections. She read them over and over, a reminder that she had survived war zones and hostile environments before. "Keep moving. Keep thinking. Don't give up," she whispered to herself. Her voice was hoarse, barely audible, yet each word carried the weight of defiance. Erin crawled to the edge of a dune, attempting to orient herself. She had memorized the ridge lines she had followed the previous night, calculating distances, imagining paths. Every movement brought intense pain, but staying still was no option. She needed to reach higher ground, if only to gain perspective on her surroundings. Meanwhile, Captain Reese Holloway and his Delta Force team had advanced carefully across the desert. Night had given way to morning light, revealing the merciless terrain: dunes, jagged rocks, and dry riverbeds. Reese's team relied on training honed through decades of covert operations. They observed, scanned, and interpreted every trace in the sand: footprints, dragged debris, subtle shifts in soil patterns. They understood that the smallest clue could mean the difference between life and death. "Thermal up," Reese whispered, his eyes scanning the horizon through night vision goggles. "Keep it steady. She's still moving. Stay focused." The team advanced slowly, deliberately, mindful of sand traps and natural obstacles. Their boots sank into loose sand with every step, but they pressed on. Hours of movement left no room for error. The desert was silent, except for the distant whistle of wind. Every member knew the mission: find Aaron Blake alive. No compromise, no excuses. Back with Aaron, hallucinations intensified. Shadows on the dunes became figures. She thought she heard voices, soldiers calling her name. Her body threatened to collapse at every step. Her mind fought against dehydration-induced delirium. She stumbled into a dry creek bed, hoping for moisture. Nothing came. Her legs gave way, and she fell onto her hands and knees. The sand burned her palms, and her mouth felt like a desert itself. But she refused to yield. She recalled the lessons of her father, a Vietnam veteran. Observe, improvise, survive. With trembling hands, she dug a shallow pit under a rock overhang, using small stones to anchor the dirt. She created a rudimentary shelter to escape the sun. Every gesture was deliberate, every action aimed at preserving energy, even as her body screamed in protest. Hours later, Erin began marking her trail. Stones, broken twigs, and scraps of cloth formed small markers along her path. It was a breadcrumb trail, a silent plea for rescue. She moved slowly, but each step demonstrated determination, refusing to let fear claim her body. The desert was brutal, but Aaron Blake was a force that refused surrender. Reese's team had found a torn page from her notebook, partially buried in sand. His heart tightened as he read her handwriting, notes detailing her struggles, observations, and sheer will to survive. "She's alive," he said, more to himself than anyone else. "And she's moving." The Delta team split into tactical units, tracking footprints and dragged objects. They interpreted Erin's path with precision, following her northward trajectory. The signs were subtle but clear. Someone alive, resourceful, and determined. Reese's respect grew for the woman who had survived against the desert's cruelty. As the sun began its descent, Erin's body wavered between determination and collapse. Her throat burned, eyes blurred, and muscles threatened to give out. Yet she forced herself to continue. Every step, every breath, every heartbeat was a testament to human endurance. She whispered again, almost a prayer, "I will survive. Someone will find me." The Delta team closed in, interpreting subtle sand movements, the displacement of rocks, and broken brush. Reese adjusted his scope and nodded. "Eyes on her. Thermal confirms movement. Hold position until we're ready to move in." Erin, exhausted beyond measure, finally stumbled into a small hollow beneath a boulder. Her notebook lay open beside her, scribbled pages fluttering in the wind. She rested her head on her knees, trying to conserve energy. In her delirium, she imagined faces. Her father, soldiers she had met, strangers she hoped would save her. She closed her eyes, breathing shallowly, letting her mind focus on survival. In the distance, Reese's team moved closer, cautiously navigating the shifting sands. Every member was alert, aware of the risk that a single mistake could trigger panic or injury. Their training demanded patience, observation, and precise execution. Erin was out there, alive, and every action they took was measured to ensure they could bring her home. As dusk approached, the desert transformed into a cold, shadowed landscape. Erin's body shivered violently, sweat replaced by chilling wind. Her hands and feet ached, and her throat screamed for water. But still, she remained conscious, driven by instinct and hope. She marked one final pile of stones, signaling her path to any potential rescuer. Reese watched through his scope, recognizing the significance. Erin's markers, her movement, her refusal to surrender. All signs of someone with remarkable resilience. The Delta team prepared for the final approach, ready to make contact without spooking or overwhelming her. Every second mattered. Erin whispered to the night, "I'm still here. I'm still fighting. Someone will come for me." And somewhere beyond the dunes, trained eyes were tracking, calculating, and closing in. The Delta team was near, methodical, relentless. Survival was no longer just Erin's fight. It was a coordinated effort, a convergence of human skill, determination, and courage. The desert had tested her, pushed her to the brink, and tried to break her spirit. Yet Erin Blake remained. Exhausted, dehydrated, hallucinating, but alive. The battle between human endurance and the unforgiving desert was far from over. But one truth had become undeniable. Erin would not surrender, and Delta Force would not fail. The desert was a living thing, shifting, unpredictable, merciless. Each dune Erin Blake traversed seemed taller than the last, every ridge line stretching endlessly toward the horizon. Her limbs burned with fatigue, every muscle trembling with the effort of walking on sand that clung to her boots like glue. She had lost track of time. Hours? Days? The sun had long since scorched the sky into a harsh, blinding white, and she moved only because she refused to collapse. She paused beneath the shadow of a jagged rock, scanning the dunes in every direction. Her throat was raw, lips cracked, and her eyes stung from the reflected sun and sand. The notebook beside her was a lifeline, filled with her observations and desperate attempts to maintain hope. She marked another pile of stones, a subtle signal for anyone searching. Her survival instinct had become sharper than ever. Hallucinations danced at the edge of her consciousness, but she focused on one goal: stay alive. Meanwhile, far beyond the reach of her eyes, Captain Reese Holloway and his Delta Force team advanced through the desert with meticulous precision. They had been tracking Erin's path for hours, studying footprints, drag marks, and small disturbances in the sand. Every sign told a story, a person struggling yet determined to survive. Reese's voice was calm but firm through comms. Split into 2 units. Maintain visual contact. Thermal scopes up. Watch for dehydration signs. We don't want to spook her. Move slow but steady. His team nodded silently, the kind of silent understanding born of years operating together in hostile zones. The operators moved like shadows across the dunes, navigating treacherous slopes and loose sand with practiced ease. The desert gave no quarter, but Delta Force was trained for environments far harsher than Nevada. They calculated each step, monitored their surroundings, and interpreted subtle signs left by Erin: displaced sand, crushed vegetation, and the occasional scrap of torn fabric. Erin stumbled again, her legs barely carrying her weight. She tasted sand in her mouth, and her vision blurred, but she refused to give in. She recalled the lessons her father had taught her: how to use the environment to conserve energy, how to find hidden shade, how to ration water. Every instinct she had ever learned in the field now mattered more than ever. Hours passed, and the heat was relentless. Erin's skin burned under the sun. Her breath came in shallow, desperate gasps. But she kept moving. Every step, every breath, every heartbeat was a defiance against the desert's cruelty. Her mental fortitude became her anchor, and she whispered to herself with unwavering determination, "They will find me. I will survive." Delta Force drew closer. Reese adjusted his scope, tracking Erin's movements. "She's still mobile," he said, voice low. "That means she's alive. Keep your distance for now. Let her see us, but don't close the gap too quickly." The team advanced slowly, maintaining a tactical formation. Every member understood the delicate balance. Approaching too aggressively might spook her, pushing her toward collapse, while approaching too slowly risked losing her altogether. Erin paused atop a ridge, looking northward. Her energy was waning, but she refused to sit. She marked another pile of stones, her silent plea for anyone watching from a distance. Somewhere beyond the dunes, the Delta team had noticed. Reese's eyes narrowed as he recognized the markers. "She's intelligent," She's leaving a trail for us. That's good. That gives us leverage to make contact safely. The operators began to fan out strategically, flanking her path while keeping a safe distance. They noted every nuance of the terrain, the rising sun, the shadow patterns, the wind direction. Survival here wasn't just about finding someone. It was about predicting human behavior under extreme stress. Erin's instinctive actions told them everything they needed to know. By late afternoon, the desert's heat remained oppressive, yet the first signs of evening offered slight relief. Erin's pace had slowed considerably. She stumbled repeatedly, using rocks and her hands for support. Her breathing was shallow, her vision occasionally darkening. Each step was agony, but she refused to yield. Delta Force was close now. Thermal imaging confirmed her position. Reese signaled to his team, moving in synchronized steps. Every operator was alert, ready for any emergency. They had seen this before. Individuals pushed to the edge of survival could collapse instantly, or worse, panic and make irrational choices. They needed her alive and aware. Erin collapsed briefly in the sand, head down, whispering through cracked lips, "Keep moving. Don't give up." She forced herself to rise, each motion a battle between strength and fatigue. Her fingers grazed another small pile of stones she had arranged earlier. She traced it with a finger, almost instinctively aware that someone might see it. Reese watched through the scope, noting every detail. "She's clever," he muttered. "Resourceful. That's why she's still alive." The team moved closer, now within a few hundred meters. They communicated silently through hand signals, adjusting for terrain and wind. Every step was calculated, ensuring they remained unseen while still closing the distance. They understood the psychological aspect of the rescue. Erin needed to see them as a promise of safety, not a threat. Erin, sensing movement in the distance, squinted toward a shimmering form. For a moment, she wondered if it was another hallucination. But something about the silhouettes, deliberate, coordinated, gave her hope. She lifted a hand, weakly waving, whispering, "Help. I'm here." Reese's heart tightened. Eyes on her. Maintain formation. Move slowly. The team advanced carefully, bridging the final distance while keeping her in sight. They approached deliberately, aware that any sudden movement could startle her. Erin's weak voice carried faintly on the wind. They identified her immediately, a small figure, hunched and worn, but unmistakably alive. Her exhaustion was obvious. Every motion was labored, every breath a struggle. Yet there was determination in her eyes. Reese signaled to the team to close in, preparing for first contact. Erin's eyes widened as she recognized the figures moving toward her. Her body shook with relief and disbelief. She whispered, barely audible, "You? Found me?" Delta Force was there, silent, skilled, precise. Reese knelt slightly, extending his hand. "We've got you. You're safe now," he said. His voice was calm, steady, and reassuring. Erin collapsed into his arms, tears mingling with sweat and dust. The team quickly stabilized her, giving water and covering her with thermal blankets. Every movement was deliberate, ensuring she remained conscious and hydrated while preparing for extraction. For the first time in days, Erin felt hope as a tangible reality. She was not alone. She had survived the desert, and the men who had tracked her through the relentless terrain were proof that human skill, courage, and loyalty could conquer even the harshest environment. The Nevada desert had tested her body, her mind, and her spirit. Yet Erin Blake had endured. And now, Delta Force was there to bring her home. The desert seemed to hold its breath as Delta Force closed in on Erin Blake. She was barely recognizable, a small, exhausted figure hunched against a jagged rock. sand and sweat clinging to her body, eyes wide with fear and disbelief. Every inch of her reflected the relentless torture of the past days. Yet there was a fire in her gaze that refused to be extinguished. She had survived this far on instinct alone, but her strength was waning. Captain Reese Holloway signaled to his team to approach slowly, carefully, maintaining visual contact without rushing her. Every operator knew the delicate balance. A sudden movement could trigger panic, making her collapse or run deeper into the desert. They had to be methodical, precise, and reassuring. Erin noticed them first as shadows moving across the dunes. She squinted, unsure if the figures were real or hallucinations conjured by heat, thirst, and exhaustion. She lifted her weak hand, trembling, and whispered, "Help!" Her voice was hoarse, barely audible over the wind, but it carried enough urgency to guide the rescuers. Reese spoke softly, keeping his tone calm and steady. "Erin Blake, we're here. You're safe. Don't worry. We've got you." He crouched low, one hand extended in a gesture of reassurance. "We're Delta Force. You're not alone anymore." Tears welled in her eyes. The sight of humans moving with purpose and control, trained, capable, and here for her, triggered an overwhelming mix of relief, exhaustion, and disbelief. She struggled to rise, knees trembling, but Reese's team was ready. They supported her, steadying her fragile frame, keeping her upright as they assessed her condition. "Water first," Reese instructed, pulling a hydration tube from his pack. Erin's lips barely formed words as she accepted the precious drops. She drank greedily, though carefully, as the team monitored for signs of heat stroke or dehydration complications. Each sip seemed miraculous, reviving her senses slowly, giving her strength to process the surreal reality. She was being rescued. The operators worked with practiced precision. Thermal blankets were draped over her shoulders to stabilize her core temperature. One medic checked her pulse, measuring vitals with swift efficiency. Her heart rate was elevated, dehydration evident, but she was alive, and she had survived an ordeal few could imagine. Erin's voice broke as she whispered, I thought I'd be alone forever." Her eyes darted to Reese. "Why? Why did you come?" Reese's expression softened, though his eyes retained the steely edge of a Delta operator. "We don't leave people behind. Ever. You held on. That's why we're here. That's why you're alive." The team began clearing a path for evacuation. A helicopter, hovering in the distance, provided the extraction point. They moved slowly, supporting Erin with gentle pressure under her arms, guiding her across the uneven sand. Her legs were weak, threatening to collapse under her, but the team's coordinated effort kept her upright. As they moved, Erin scanned the operators' faces, the silent determination, the unflinching focus, the understanding that this was more than a mission. It was a matter of life and death. She realized, in a profound way, that these men operated in a world where hesitation was fatal and courage was a daily requirement. They were the guardians she had only glimpsed from the edges of her assignment, now manifest in flesh and action. By the time they reached the helicopter, Erin could barely walk without support. Reese knelt beside her, adjusting the straps of her harness, and spoke quietly, "Almost there. Just a few more steps. You've made it this far. We're not letting go now." The rotor washed through sand around them, stinging eyes and whipping through clothing. Erin clung to Reese and another operator, every motion taxing her exhausted body. The helicopter's rear ramp lowered, and the team guided her aboard with steady hands. Once inside, she sank onto the floor, letting the weight of her ordeal press down. The Delta team remained vigilant, keeping a protective perimeter as the aircraft lifted into the sky. As they ascended, Erin finally allowed herself to breathe fully. The desert below shrank, its endless dunes stretching into a horizon she had once thought infinite and inescapable. Her tears fell freely now, mixing with sweat and dust. The ordeal was over, yet the memory would never fade. A medic sat beside her, checking vitals again and offering water and sugar. Erin sipped, letting the physical sustenance ease some of the mental burden. She opened her notebook, revealing pages of desperate sketches, observations, and survival notes. One operator carefully flipped through the pages, nodding in acknowledgement. Her resourcefulness had given them the clues they needed to locate her. Reese spoke softly, not taking his eyes off the view outside. "You fought to survive, Erin. That's why you're here. That's why you're safe." Erin's voice cracked as she said, I thought I'd die out there. I thought no one would find me. I kept moving, kept marking stones. I just prayed." "You did more than pray," Reese replied. "You acted. You survived. That's what matters." The helicopter hummed steadily, carrying them back toward base. Erin felt every inch of the fatigue settle into her bones. Her body was bruised, dehydrated, sunburned, but intact. She had endured one of the harshest environments imaginable, and had come through alive, not by chance, but by will, instinct, and now by the precise skill of men who refused to abandon her. As the aircraft approached the base, Erin glanced at the operators, noting the silent pride and professionalism in their movements. These men had trained for countless scenarios, yet each one approached this rescue as if it were personal. That realization struck her deeply. Someone had chosen to risk time, resources, and perhaps even safety to bring her home. The helicopter touched down, and the team carefully helped Erin off the ramp, steadying her against the desert floor one last time. She was surrounded, safe, and finally able to comprehend the magnitude of her ordeal. Delta Force had not only tracked her across the relentless dunes, but had brought her back alive. Medical personnel rushed to check her thoroughly, but Reese remained nearby, watching, ensuring the transition from rescue to recovery was seamless. Erin's eyes met his, gratitude and awe mixing with the exhaustion that had defined the last 48 hours. "I can't thank you enough," she whispered. "You don't need to," Reese replied, voice steady. "You survived. That's all the thanks we need." For the first time since the explosion and the chaotic convoy departure, Erin allowed herself to relax. She closed her eyes, breathing deeply, letting the reality sink in. She had endured the desert, survived dehydration, hallucinations, and sheer exhaustion, and now she was safe. Her notebook, filled with desperate marks, observations, and survival strategies, lay beside her. She realized how close she had come to being a cautionary tale, and how remarkable it was that Delta Force had not only found her, but done so with precision, care, and unwavering commitment. The base's medical staff continued their work, stabilizing her, hydrating her, and ensuring no lasting effects of heat stroke or dehydration remained. But Erin's spirit, unbroken, shone clearly in her exhausted but unwavering gaze. She had endured. She had survived. And she would live to tell the story. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the desert, Erin Blake realized that the desert had tested her beyond measure. But it had also revealed something profound. Resilience, courage, and human determination could overcome even the most relentless forces of nature. And when skilled, compassionate individuals intervened, survival became not only possible, but inevitable. Erin Blake awoke to a ceiling of white fluorescent lights and the faint hum of medical equipment. The sterile scent of antiseptic replaced the desert wind. She blinked, disoriented, her body still heavy with exhaustion. Every muscle ached, a constant reminder of the desert's merciless trial. Her throat was dry, but water and electrolyte solutions slowly restored her strength. The Delta Force team had ensured her safe arrival, And now she was under the watchful care of medics who monitored her every vital sign. Yet despite the physical relief, her mind churned with thoughts she could barely process. The desert, the chaos of being left behind, the hallucinations, and the overwhelming presence of men who had risked everything to save her. Reese Holloway stood just outside the room, leaning against the doorway. His eyes were calm, measured, the same look that had carried him through countless operations. Erin smiled weakly, and he nodded in acknowledgement, a quiet affirmation that she was safe and the mission had been completed successfully. "You're awake," he said simply. "Yeah," she whispered. Her voice was hoarse, but the words carried gratitude and relief. I can't believe you found me." Reese's expression softened slightly. "You made it easy and hard at the same time. You survived against impossible odds. That's why we found you. You fought." She closed her eyes, letting the words sink in. She thought of the desert, its heat, the endless dunes, the wind that had screamed at her relentlessly, the hallucinations that had teased and terrified her. She had endured all of it, and now she was alive, not by chance, but by her resilience and the unwavering skill of Delta Force. Over the next several days, Erin began to recover physically. Her hydration levels returned to normal, sunburns healed, and her muscles slowly regained strength. Yet it was the mental recovery that proved more challenging. Nightmares of the desert, flashbacks to every step she had taken, and a haunting memory of the convoy leaving her behind weighed heavily on her. Therapy sessions and conversations with medics helped, but Erin found solace in writing. Her notebook, filled with observations and survival strategies, became the foundation for a narrative she desperately needed to tell. She documented every detail, the desert's unforgiving nature, her own fears, the hallucinations, and the relentless determination that had kept her alive. One afternoon, Reese entered her room, a rare moment of downtime in his otherwise disciplined schedule. "How's the writing going?" he asked. "It's hard," Erin admitted. "Every word I write takes me back there. But it's also necessary. People need to know what really happened, how fragile life can be, and how much courage takes to survive." Reese nodded, understanding. "You've seen both sides, the vulnerability and the strength. That's what makes your story real. That's what will resonate." Erin smiled faintly. "I want people to understand that survival isn't about luck. It's about determination, preparation, and sometimes the skill of others willing to risk everything to bring you home." Word of her ordeal spread quietly, at first within military circles, then beyond. Her survival story became a testament to human endurance, but also a spotlight on Delta Force, a unit whose existence was shrouded in secrecy yet whose actions spoke louder than words. The nation took notice. Erin's interviews, written articles, and later televised accounts highlighted not just her personal journey, but the courage and expertise of those who had saved her. During recovery, she reflected on the men who had risked everything for her safety. Reese and his team had tracked her across the desert, interpreting subtle signs, reading the terrain, and predicting her movements. They had moved with precision, care, and compassion. Erin realized that survival had been a shared effort, a delicate dance between her own willpower and the unparalleled skill of Delta Force. Her time in the desert had also reshaped her perspective on life. The ordeal forced her to confront her limits, recognize the strength she hadn't realized she possessed, and acknowledge the vulnerability that made survival possible only through courage and ingenuity. She understood that moments of desperation often reveal the true character of a person, and in her case, the character of those who saved her. During her hospitalization, Erin made a point to visit the Delta team informally, observing them in their element, rigorous training exercises, methodical drills, and quiet moments of reflection. She saw the same discipline that had guided them through her rescue. She saw humility in their accomplishments, dedication in their actions, and unwavering loyalty to those in need. In her heart, she knew that what had saved her was not just her own survival instincts, but the seamless coordination, bravery, and humanity of the men who refused to leave her behind. Her story would forever honor them, not as mere background figures, but as heroes whose presence had turned desperation into survival. As she regained her physical strength, Erin began giving interviews, detailing the desert ordeal with both precision and emotion. Her words captured the tension, the fear, and the courage that had defined her survival. She described the blistering heat, the hallucinations, and the exhaustion that pushed her to the brink. She spoke candidly about the Delta Force operators who had found her, emphasizing their skill, patience, and dedication. The public was captivated. Erin's story resonated beyond the military audience, inspiring civilians and soldiers alike. She became a symbol of resilience, a living proof that determination combined with skill and support could overcome nearly insurmountable challenges. In private moments, Erin would sometimes close her eyes and picture the desert, the endless dunes, and the crushing heat. But instead of fear, she now felt gratitude for her own endurance, for the Delta Force team, and for the life that awaited her beyond the desert. One evening, Reese visited her again, sitting quietly at the edge of the hospital room. Erin looked at him with a mixture of exhaustion and awe. "I still can't believe you found me," she said softly. "You survived," he replied simply. "That's why we found you. You never gave up. You never stopped fighting. That's all that mattered." Erin smiled faintly, tears in her eyes. "I owe you my life, and I want everyone to know how incredible your team is, how they saved me when no one else would." Reese nodded, acknowledging her words without fanfare. Delta Force operated in silence, letting actions speak louder than recognition. But Erin understood, and her story would carry their courage forward. The desert ordeal was behind her, but its lessons endured. Erin had faced death, isolation, and the unforgiving elements, and emerged alive. Her journey from despair to survival became a testament to human endurance, courage, and the unseen heroes who ensure that no one is ever truly left behind. Weeks had passed since Erin Blake's rescue, and the initial wave of medical stabilization had given way to rehabilitation and reflection. Her body, though still tired, had recovered significantly. Her muscles were stronger, her skin less raw from sunburn, and the fevered haze of dehydration and hallucination had faded into memory. Yet it was her mind that carried the heaviest weight, memories of the desert, the isolation, the fear, and the relentless sun beating down on her body. Erin spent hours writing, carefully documenting every moment of her ordeal. She filled pages with observations, survival strategies, emotional reflections, and the names and deeds of the Delta Force operators who had saved her. For her, the story was not only personal, but a tribute, a testament to resilience, skill, and unwavering human determination. Her narrative began attracting attention beyond the military community. News outlets, both national and international, picked up her story. Her interviews captivated audiences, her words painting a vivid picture of a young woman left behind in a hostile environment, forced to confront death and despair, and ultimately saved by an elite team whose precision and courage were unparalleled. Erin recounted her survival with both honesty and respect for those who had aided her. She described dehydration, hallucinations, and the suffocating isolation of the desert. She shared the small strategies that had kept her alive, rationing water, marking a trail, seeking shade, and moving strategically. But more importantly, she highlighted Delta Force's crucial role, their tracking expertise, tactical precision, and commitment to leaving no one behind. Captain Reese Holloway and his team remained largely anonymous in the public narrative, their identities shielded by operational security. Erin respected that, emphasizing their professionalism and skill without revealing details that could compromise their missions. Her words conveyed admiration and gratitude, recognizing them as true heroes working silently, often in the shadows, to save lives. Despite the accolades and growing public interest, Erin's recovery was not just physical. Each day, she wrestled with the psychological aftermath of near-death experience. Flashbacks of the desert, the scorching heat, the endless dunes, the hallucinations, surfaced unpredictably. Yet, she also reflected on the strength she had discovered within herself. An unyielding will, a capacity to endure, and a determination to survive against impossible odds. Friends, family, and colleagues visited regularly. Their concern was genuine, but Erin found herself most comforted by the simple truth that she had been found, saved, and supported by men who operated with unwavering commitment. The story of her rescue became as much about her resilience as it was about the Delta Force's precision and bravery. One afternoon, Reese visited her in the hospital. Their conversations were quiet but meaningful. "You've inspired a lot of people," he said, studying her intently. "Not just by surviving, but by telling the story accurately, showing what real courage looks like." Erin nodded, exhausted yet resolute. "I couldn't have done it alone. And I won't let anyone forget what your team did, how you moved across the desert, calculated every detail, and brought me back alive. That's the part people need to understand." Reese smiled faintly, acknowledging her words. "We don't need recognition. You being alive, telling your story, that's enough. But thank you for saying it." Outside, the public had embraced Erin's story. Articles detailed her survival in vivid detail. Television interviews highlighted her ordeal, showing maps of the desert, photographs, and even excerpts from her notebook. Social media shared her story, inspiring millions. Readers marveled at her determination, and many drew lessons about resilience, preparation, and the importance of not giving up even in the direst circumstances. Her story became a symbol of hope for civilians and soldiers alike, but also served as a reminder of the unseen heroes who work behind the scenes. Erin emphasized repeatedly that her survival was not merely a matter of luck, but a combination of human willpower and the skill, discipline, and courage of Delta Force operators who tracked her across the desert and ensured her safe recovery. In private, Erin continued to write her reflections. She documented the small, precise actions that had kept her alive, digging depressions under rocks, rationing her water, marking her trail with stones, and relying on the mental techniques she had learned in dangerous field assignments. She included detailed observations of the terrain, the behavior of sand dunes, wind patterns, and the subtle signs that indicated life, information that could help others in similar situations. Months after the rescue, Erin was invited to speak at military and survival conferences. She shared her experience, focusing on human resilience and the importance of preparation, teamwork, and trust. Her story inspired both soldiers and civilians, and her reflections often returned to the Delta Force team, ensuring that their contributions were recognized without compromising operational security. Through it all, Erin remained humble. She never claimed to be a hero. The desert had tested her, but it was the coordination, skill, and courage of Delta Force that had guaranteed her survival. She consistently credited them for their seamless tracking, tactical awareness, and unwavering commitment. They had not only saved her life, but had demonstrated what true professional excellence looked like in the most extreme conditions. On the anniversary of her rescue, Erin returned briefly to the edge of the desert, her body fully recovered, but her mind ever aware of the landscape that had tested her so severely. She stood atop a ridge, looking across the dunes where every moment had been a battle. The sun set in a blaze of gold and red, painting the sands with shadows and light. She reflected silently, paying tribute to both her own endurance and the Delta Force operators who had guided her back to life. Erin took a small rock from the ground, placing it carefully atop a pile she constructed, a symbolic gesture of remembrance and gratitude. She whispered into the wind, a quiet acknowledgement of the life she had regained and the men who had made it possible. Her story, now told, became part of the larger narrative of resilience and courage. It was studied in survival courses, military briefings, and even civilian workshops, serving as both an instructional and inspirational tale. Erin's ordeal demonstrated the limits of human endurance, the importance of preparation and strategy, and the life-saving impact of teamwork and expertise. Months turned into years, but Erin never forgot the lessons of the desert. Her experience shaped her work, her relationships, and her perspective on life. She continued writing, advocating for survival awareness, and honoring the silent heroism of those who risk their lives to save others. Ultimately, Erin Blake emerged from the desert, not just as a survivor, but as a living testament to the power of human determination, resilience, and the extraordinary capabilities of those trained to protect and rescue. Her story concluded not with despair, but with triumph, a triumph that highlighted the indomitable human spirit and the unwavering commitment of Delta Force operators who proved that no one is ever truly left behind. Her story became legendary, not simply for the ordeal, but for the courage, expertise, and humanity that turned near-certain tragedy into an inspiring tale of survival, hope, and heroism.